300,000 na yon,
Can
ito
you because
yung 300,000, ito yung total number of teachers in the private education sector, yung private schools, no? And most of them are receiving reduced pay or no work, no pay since March. Dahil po nag-open tayo August lang, no? Tapos meron tayong reduced school year, no, last year. So we can assume na lahat sila talaga affected, yung 300,000 na yon, no. So we're not only talking about the 4,000 of the 800 schools that are closing.
High school and elementary and high school lang ba yan o pati higher education?
Elementary and high school lang po yon, yung 300,000 teachers.
Tapos may mga nag-migrate din, di ba? Mga students, marami daw ngayon, thousands of students moved from private schools to public kasi nga libre at maraming nawalan ng trabaho. Sa ngayon po, mga ilan po yun, yung mga estudyante nyo, na-monitor nyo na ba?
Well, we base it also from DepEd data. So as of July 27, ang sabi po ng DepEd, around 400,000 students in the private schools have moved to the public school system. Napakarami po nun. Almost 10% na po yun ng entire entire enrollment sa private schools.
Paano ngayon yung gagawin ng mga school kung ganyang hindi naman pwedeng completely sarado na ba yan? Magsususpend. Is it possible to suspend for 1 year and then you resume again?
Temporary ba yan o permanent closure na?
Kaya nga
Kapag po kasi kapag ikaw ay voluntarily nag-suspend ng operations, pwede ka pa rin makabalik. Kaya lang, medyo mahirap yon kasi babalik ka ulit sa permit phase. No? You will have to go through that tedious process of getting that government authority to operate. Kaya marami rin kahit hirap na, gusto pa rin talaga nilang ipagpatuloy dahil they don't want also to lose the goodwill, they lose their students. Mahirap makabalik. Pero nevertheless, talagang maraming hindi kakayanin. So, yun nga po, ayon sa DepEd, 865 ang hindi magbubukas ngayong taon.
Tama yung tanong ko yung mga hindi nagsara, those who are still trying to tread water and trying to survive and try to get past this phase, how are they surviving? I mean, in the meantime, bukas sila, but I imagine reduced ang enrollment and binabaan nila tuition. I mean, what other pain points are there even for those who have not closed?
Well, marami silang ginagawang paraan na lamang para makapag-survive. One of which is, of course, they're hoping na magkaroon ng economic assistance through the Bayanihan 2. Medyo inaasahan din yon. Tapos yung enrollment kasi ngayon, kahit papano, hinihintay pa natin na matapos yung magsara yung enrollment period. Marami pa rin umaasa na they may be able to collect some budget to sustain their operations at least for the coming school year. So ganun po talaga, reduction in cost, yung iba extreme measures, nagle-lay off na ng mga empleyado, nagbabawas ng closing also certain programs. So talagang cost cutting dun sa mga nakakapag-survive pa.
Attorney, I imagine there are ways to categorize private schools as well. Merong mga high-end, merong mga mura lang. At the same time, we could probably categorize them according to student population and so on. Which along these categories are particularly affected and talagang mas hirap even more than the others?
Actually, Robbie, it's not really yung size ng school. Kasi ngayon ang observation namin, actually in some regions, mas hirap yung mas malalaki, because they have to maintain a huge number of staffing, personnel, marami silang facilities. So mas nahirapan sila, mas agile yung mga smaller schools. Pero ngayon, pag tiningnan natin talaga yung mga schools affected, more on the elementary, those who are offering basic education. Dahil doon, maraming hindi na talaga nag-enroll because they involve yung younger pupils. So some parents really they no longer continued with their education this year. And kasi walang government support sa mga estudyante sa private schools in elementary. At marami yan, no? 1.2 million ang ating students in elementary. So most of the schools that closed and most that I think did not enroll are really from the lower levels. Nasa elementary po yan, regardless whether big or small schools.
Attorney, dito po sa Department Order 13 series, no? Meron po kayong mga panawagan. You were looking for policy interventions, in particular, that the policies be less regulatory. What do you mean by that exactly?
Well, unang-una, we wanted sana to, of course, continue within education. We think that the private schools should be supported and be allowed to continue rather than be regulated. Ang sentiment po kasi ngayon ng private sector is that, like for example, that DO13, if you apply the same standards sa public school system, we can expect that they will fail, no? Even the training of the teachers, learner management system. So why apply it in the private schools? And under what benchmark are we evaluating the private schools in terms of their readiness? That's one. Number two, yung timing. Nung nilabas yung DO13 na yan, it was only in June 24. May mga nakapagbukas na private schools and the deadline to comply is July 5. Now they extended it to December 29, but not all of the requirements. No, so and we think that again, the private schools should be supported, no? Should be encouraged to deliver. The government should support innovation, no? Which is of course lacking in the public school system. So
Yes,
that's our appeal.
No? Ano ba itong you have to have your own learning platform or learning management system? What is that? What does that comprise?
Well, if you have parang parang online lahat, no? So lahat ng services ng school from classes, no, yung mga virtual classrooms, yung grading system, the student should be able to access this in a learner management system. May mga may mga available. So since the preferred mode in the private sector is online, and then they should have the learner management system and included yan sa mga requirements. But again, we think that it should encourage private schools to go towards that direction rather than discouraging them. No? Like meron dyan, may requirement, for example, 24/7, meron kang help desk, no? To answer calls, mga ganyan. So, or you have to purchase yung mga learner management system. You have to train all of your teachers in all of these modalities within that limited period. And again, I think we're just in a transition period. We should be allowed to transition, no, smoothly and in a less regulatory environment. No? And it also entails cost. Yung mga requirements yan, dagdag pa yan sa gastusin ng school. And saan ba kukunin ng schools yung panggastos dyan? We are tuition funded by the parents. Again, we are between the low enrollment and a hard place. We cannot also raise tuition. No, in fact, we're reducing it.
So what are you saying? You want a combination of face-to-face? Are you saying na gusto nyong payagan kahit konti yung face-to-face learning?
Actually, we are preparing for that eventuality. Pero of course, contingent yan kung kailan papayagan ng IATF and our executive. But nevertheless, we are preparing because I think we're the only country now na wala pang schedule ng reopening na face-to-face, kahit gradual or phased, wala pa. In other countries, in ASEAN countries, yung usually tayo ay kino-compare, nag-open na po sila, no? And we have presented this in the IATF and also in DepEd in CHIEFS na in case we reopen, we can simulate na how things will happen, what will be the effect on the transmission, resurgence. Lahat po yan pinag-aaralan. And again, it's not really the opening of the schools, no, that will have a major effect in the spike of new cases, but actually on how disciplined we are, no, and how we observe that strict social distancing, how we put in place operational changes, yung mga shifting, and of course, yung public transport, lahat yan. No? So if we really want to have normalcy, at least in our operations, gradual, we really have to prepare. Hindi pwedeng kung next month sabi i-open na natin ang schools, doon pa lang tayo magpaplano. So,
Attorney,
yeah.
for example, yun, nabanggit nyo yung Southeast Asian countries that yung iba na uuwi na. I mean, what are the timelines and what is the scheduling look like in our neighboring countries, for example? Para lang meron tayong pagbabasihan.
Yeah, karamihan sa kanila, they started with the higher age groups, no, higher levels. And then they went into shifting, so para hindi intense yung kung may transmission, hindi intense, na hindi lahat affected. They went into shifting. Tapos may mga, of course, yung mga social distancing like 1 meter, 1.5 or 2 meters. Tapos ang schedule nila, karamihan sa kanila nakapag-reopen na. No, yung iba nga hindi nag-close, like Taiwan, it never closed, no. Ang napansin namin doon, yung mga countries that remain closed, including the Philippines, yung increase stable, no. Stable, tumataas pa rin, no. Pero yung mga nagbukas na, actually sila pa yung except for 3 countries, I think Israel, Singapore, and another one. Sila, except for them, actually yung mga nagbukas, sila pa yung nag-decrease, no. At na-manage, nag-flatten na. And the cause is that they were able, a study would show that it's actually again observing social distancing, rapid testing, lahat po yan, no, yung it really matters, no. Not really closing down. So yung between full closure and reopening, very insignificant yung difference in transmission.
Okay. If you were to suggest easing the regulations, especially in terms of the learning management system, what would be to you an acceptable, what would you suggest? Anong klaseng learning management system ang masasuggest ninyo na manageable sa costs ninyo?
Well, ano po yan? Number one, the schools should be able to develop their own LMS. No? Kasi sa private schools, meron pong kaya po nilang mag-develop. They don't have to purchase. No? So that's number one. And there should be a period for us to reasonably comply. And I think ang pinaka-important po dyan, Ms. Lucci, is that there should be consultation, no? Wide consultation. Kasi po yung dinatermine doon, yung sinet na standards, well, from DepEd lang din po yung gumawa doon. We don't know about their expertise. Again, it should have been subjected to consultation of not only of the schools, including sana yung mga parents and student groups para makapag-suggest sila, no, ano yung what would fit their school community, kasi iba-iba rin tayo ng iba-iba din yung capabilities ng students, iba-iba din capabilities ng mga schools. That should be properly determined, no. Again, it should be less regulatory. Ang ano po namin policy intervention is that we should be allowed to innovate. That's number one. And if we are able to innovate but we have limited resources, then government should fund that, no. Kasi even in the developing countries, ang role na po ng government ngayon is not really to control education, no, but to fund and regulate it. Sa atin po kasi it's still the government that controls it, no, including standards. Imagine standards, including manner, yung how teaching is delivered inside the classroom. Lahat yan sineset pa ng gobyerno natin. So instead of introducing innovation quality, no, through the private sector, ang nangyayari, we are being pushed down to the minimum standards because we are parang nilalagay tayo sa level lang ng what may be delivered in the public school system. And it's all contingent on resources. Laging based on access, lagi tayo sa minimum. Ang concrete example ko nga po dyan ngayon is, here during remote learning, ang preferred mode sa public school system modular, yung nagpiprint ng materials. Pero sa private, online or blended, no? So, but we all know, kung meron tayong choice, of course, the parents and the students would choose online. Kasi yon, that's the closest simulation to an actual class setting, no, nagbi-video class ka, walang limited yung, or if not completely avoided yung contact, no, yung yung mobility ng teachers, wala nang ganon eh. Like, unlike in modular, nagpiprint, nagdi-deliver ng ano. So makikita mo eh, bakit yun ang pinili, no? Because of resources, because of lack of expertise. So again, there should be complementarity. More, and lastly, yung pong operation ng private schools, wala naman pong additional cost yan sa government eh. So we don't really understand why the government should regulate us, over-regulate us. Walang additional cost. In fact, the government saves money when it allows more participation from the private sector. Why? Because it saves on hiring more teachers, building more facilities, data classrooms. The higher the participation of the private sector, the lesser burden for the government. So ngayon po, maraming underutilized, maraming unutilized na private schools, even with good facilities, good resources, and well-trained teachers, hindi po nagagamit dahil nga po very low enrollment. Wala pang 50% po nag-enroll.
Yeah. Okay. Last na lang po, you have access to say the television modules that the DepEd is now producing. Pwede nyo bang gawing option din yun?
Meron pong sa akin nakarating na in some regions, nagtanong sila dyan, if they want to access, they have to pay, no? They have to pay din sa mga TV or radio time, no? So hindi pa maliwanag, actually pati sa DepEd hindi pa maliwanag how it will supplement yung modular delivery sa kanila. Sa mga private schools, titingnan din namin how they will implement that in the public school, on whether it can also supplement our delivery mode. Ang kulang kasi doon, walang interaction talaga.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no interaction between the student, between the learner and the teacher. No?
Okay. All right. Maraming salamat po sa inyo, Attorney Joseph Noel Estrada of COCOPEA. Have a good evening po and thank you.
Thank you po.
Maraming salamat po. Thank you, Ed, Robbie, Lucy, and Ann. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you.
All right. Don't go away. The Chiefs will be back.
Welcome back to the Chiefs. We're now in the final stage of our conversation. And now joining us is Assistant Secretary Kris Ablan of the Presidential Communications Operations Office. Good evening po, Asec, and welcome to the Chiefs.
Good evening po, Ma'am Ami. Thank you for having me on your show.
Yes. Okay, you're in
Yes, sir.
charge of messaging, no? Especially in communicating directives, mga messages to the public kung paano in this pandemic, kung paano how to maintain the public health safety protocols. Ngayon, nagkakaproblema ngayon within the past few days yung sa especially yung sa distancing sa transport. I want to ask kung anong, are you going to, meron ba kayong role dyan ngayon? Kung paano lilinawin yan? Kasi nag-aaway yung mga cabinet member ngayon eh. Paano gagawin? Meron bang instruction? Any special instructions sa PCOO?
Yes, ma'am. Ang PCOO ay member po ng IATF COVID-19. And so we will be developing communications campaign with regard to policies po pagdating po sa public transportation in mga 1 meter apart po. So you can be assured po as soon as the policy is finalized, the PCOO will step in po to assist the IATF in communicating that to the public.
So in the meantime, wala pa kasi iniintay pa yung decision ni Presidente, no? Di ba kayo mahihirapan niya kung gano'n na sa loob ng sasakyan 0.75 lang pero sa labasan all the rest of the places in the country, ganun pa rin 1 meter. Hindi ba mahirap-hirap yun?
Hindi po ako yung nakatoka po, Ma'am Ami, sa IATF, iba pong ASEC, pero I'm pretty sure po maayos po nila yan as soon as ma-finalize po yung policy pagdating po sa 1 meter. But I do understand po yung concern ninyo na medyo absurd nga po nun.
Okay. As linawin ko lang po, because sabi niyo nga po, once ma-finalize, you'll be ready with information campaign and material. So, linawin lang natin. So, hindi pa finalized. But the question is, bakit lumabas yung information material? I mean, why was there an information campaign immediately basically telling people about the schedule for minimizing the distancing protocols when right now you're saying actually there was nothing to communicate yet?
Yes, I think that was the call po of the Department of Transportation. So we have to resolve that na dapat until final po siya, dapat di mo na maglabas ng communications kasi it may cause nga confusion and panic to the public. We take note of that po, Sir Robbie.
Asek, medyo na-suspend ang hearing recently, no? Pinag-uusapan yung budget ng PCOO, lalo
Yes,
na
Ma'am Luchi.
nagalit yata yung mga makabayan bloc sa Congress, no? Dahil nga sa, in particular, calling out yung Sec. Lorraine Badoy and how he has red tagged them. Kumusta na kayo dyan sa inyong budget presentation ngayon na you're facing a very hostile Congress on account of that?
We are scheduled po for our resumption on hearing our budget, Ma'am Luchi, this coming Friday, September 18. We are optimistic that this Friday po, we will have our budget approved in the committee level and we are looking forward po to plenary presentation next week.
Bakit parang mas mababa yung hinihingi nyo for next year, considering that we're entering still a COVID year, no? And there has to be a lot of communication, game plan, even more intense, why the lower budget for next year?
You are correct, no, Ma'am Luchi. We decreased our budget proposal for next year by 10%. So from 1.7 billion pesos allocated for this year, we are asking for 1.59 or so for 2021. The reason behind this is the 10% decrease comes from the presidential trips po. There wouldn't be any presidential trips by next year because of the COVID pandemic. So yun po yung reason ng decrease sa budget namin.
I see.
Asek, yung
Sir, alam pala ng 10% ng budget niya goes to trips?
Yes, yes Sir Ed, no, malaki because pumupunta po ang RTVM, no, to cover the president. So it does rack up on expenses po.
RTVM.
And not only foreign trips but also local trips. So it all adds up in the year po. So yes, 10% would be for those trips.
Asec, beyond yung
Sir,
expectations
if I may ask, sir, something related to...
Yes. Ed.
Sige po,
Ed,
go ahead.
Ed,
Okay, sorry. Okay. Asec,
Robbie, go ahead.
Okay. Asec, pasensya na po. May delay yata ng konti on some end. But beyond your expectations na papasa yung budget nyo, I still want to get back to Makabayan's concerns about the posts and the comments of Asec Badoy. I won't get into the specific comments, but really to the question of, malinaw na po ba yung policy ng PCOO when it comes to the social media platforms and the individual platforms of the officers of the PCOO? Ano po ba talaga policy dito?
Yes, Sir Robbie, no? So what happens is PCOO is a member of various task force, including the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict. And si Undersecretary Lorraine Badoy po ang aming representative there. And so we cater, no, to our stakeholder and client agencies like NTF-ELCAC, and we provide them with the platforms to communicate with the people. We provide them with the platforms on print, on TV, on radio, on the ground, and online. So malinaw po na we give support to the different committees and the task force when they require communications assistance. Now, at the same time, our representatives po are also private individuals, so they do share and they do invoke their right to expression po, no, as protected by Section 4, Article 3 of the Constitution. So, yun po yung aming policy, no. So, we respect po the freedom of expression of our members, but at the same time, we also serve at the pleasure of the agencies we serve po.
Yes, but what does that mean? But what does that mean specifically for officers whose job is communication and whose job is basically speaking for government? Because sa totoo lang po, I mean, I was there at the Senate hearing, I think about 2 years ago, when Asec Badoy again made some statements. At that point, I think critical of Vice President Lenny Robredo and so on. And the question was raised even there. This was a Senate hearing. This was not her time to be posting on Facebook. She was speaking under oath in a Senate hearing, and again, saying some controversial things. And then at the end of the day, the PCOOs and Asec Badoy saying, no, I was speaking on a personal level. Is that really possible? And what really is the most pragmatic policy that can be had, particularly for an office whose job is to speak for government? Can you really make that line? Can you really make that distinction?
I understand your concerns, Sir Robin, no? But our stand right now is we really have to respect the freedom of expression right of our officials, while we also do our concurrent role as communicators for government.
Okay.
Pero Asec, ano po kasi the freedom of expression relates to your right or your right not to be prosecuted criminally. For example, like under the revised penal code, it does not take away anybody's responsibility under the administrative code or under the RA 6713. That's the Code of Conduct for Public Officials. Hindi po exemption yung public speech, right of free expression dun sa 6713. It does exempt you from, for example, criminal liability.
That's correct, no. While I mentioned that earlier, we are still we still have to follow our RA 6713 and other rules governing our conduct. And so, pag beyond po dun sa limitation, then pwede naman po siya ma-prosecute and be held accountable, sir. We actually have a PCOO social media policy governing all officials and staff of PCOO that they should not engage in unlawful conduct, share malicious content, blackmail content. So may guidelines naman po kami, pero of course, sometimes po nagbo-border po siya between free expression and responsibility as a public officer. So there is a gray area po sa gitna, and hopefully we're able to balance both.
Napag-uusapan yung social media, sabi ni former PNP Chief Archie Goa. Yun daw pagmamonitor sa Facebook and social media ng mga violators or potential violations of health protocols ay ipinapasa inyo na sa PCOO ang pagmamonitor. Can you give us an idea as to how you're going to undertake this very, very delicate, very sensitive job, that again, sort of like forays into the press freedom balance and the government regulation of speech?
Thanks, Ma'am Lucia. No, unfortunately, I am not privy to the discussion po regarding the PNP transferring that activity to the PCOO. It has not been assigned by Secretary Andanar, I believe, to any undersecretary or assistant secretary. So we'll have to get to you. We have to get back to you on that. But
So you're saying right now, hindi nyo gagawin yan?
I am not privy to the plans and the transfer of the activity, Ma'am Lucy.
Okay.
PCOO is also involved in di ba, yung safety of journalists. Kasama kayo dun sa grupong yon. Ngayon may nakatay na naman sa yung broadcaster, online broadcaster. Kumusta na yung measures to provide more protection for journalists, whether in a pandemic or not? Saka
Yes.
yung prosecution ng mga kaso, umaandar ba? Kumusta na siya?
Yes, Ma'am Ami. The PCOO co-chairs the Presidential Task Force on Media Security together with the DILG po and with PNP. The one leading the Presidential Task Force is under the Office of the President. That's Undersecretary Joel C. Egco. And I can assure you po that very active po ang Presidential Task Force. They look after po the safety of our journalists. For the instance na sinabi niyo po, Ma'am Ami, I'm pretty sure po may pinadala na po na investigator ang Presidential Task Force dun sa namatay po na online na journalist. So umaandar din naman po yung mga kaso, binibigyan din naman po sila ng mula po sa PNP at sa DOJ.
Okay. Asec, in the meantime, another advocacy that
I don't
you
know if
are...
this is under your jurisdiction.
Go ahead.
I don't know if this is under jurisdiction, pero let me try it anyway. I was wondering po kung klaro na doon sa PCOO exactly ano yung rules o yung regulations as far as editing the president's public speeches are concerned. Because we had that experience yung July 13 sa Holo, kung saan in a public speech made by the president, hindi niya rin kabuuan ng communications office ang nag-edit out ng certain portions that are relatively controversial. So what is the policy po when it comes to that?
I already spoke with the executive director po of Radio Television Malacanang RTVM, si ED Demic Pabalan. And sabi naman po niya, ang policy namin is not really to, as much as possible, to report the entire discussion or speech of the president. It just so happens that there have been comments that the president's speeches have been longer than usual, and there were actually requests from media. I'm not particularly sure kung kanino po galing, if they can have an abridged or edited version because medyo mahaba nga po pag magtalumpati si President. So yan po ang sagot po sa akin ng RTVM, Sir Ed.
So,
Yes, sir. Pero sir, in that case in Holo, sir, it was not edited for brevity. It was edited for content, specifically for sensitive content, where the president, the portions edited out had to do with ABS-CBN, with Rappler, the Ayala family, the Consunis, and even Mr. Manny Pangilinan. So, and in the president's speech, marami talagang kwento. I don't know if you can really edit out just like that for brevity the president's speech if you plan to publish it as the president's speech.
I would have to get back on you on that, Sir Ed, and discuss it with the RTVM kung ano yung nangyari po dun sa Holo speech.
Since we're on the topic, and this is a genuine curiosity of mine, yung PCOO, we feel for you. Everybody knows, mahaba pag minsan magtalumpati ang president, mahaba ang mga meetings, but this is already also affecting and raising questions about people's access to information, particularly sa weekly meetings with the IATF. We now expect that it might come in later because people expect na baka kasi nag-meeting nung umaga or kahapon and it's taking so long to edit this. This is a genuine curiosity of mine para rin ma-appreciate namin yung process. Paano nga po ba ang proseso dito? You let the meeting finish and then you also make the editorial call on which to cut out and so on. Ano po ba ang proseso dito?
Right. Let me just set things straight, Sir Robbie. No, the broadcasting po of the presidential meetings is not really the general rule. In fact, prior to the presidency of President Rodrigo Duterte, the presidential meetings are not broadcasted by the previous presidents. It's only under this administration that we've been proactively broadcasting po IATF meetings, sometimes cabinet meetings, and so that is the exception to the general rule. So that's first things first. Next po, with regards po to the scheduling of the meetings and the broadcasting, we do have received comments po that media actually prefer to get the information in the evening rather than in the afternoon so that they can make for the news po for tomorrow. Yan po yung explanation po sa akin, Sir Robbie.
Masyado namang late yung evening nyo. Alam mo, sinang gabi.
I don't know who made that request and hindi ako nakikipagdebate. Ang sa akin lang, my personal instinct there is I would prefer to get the news when it happens, when it actually happens, and failing that, at the very least, gusto ko malinaw yung context, di ba? At least kailangan malinaw sa akin how long did it take to process this, why did it take so long, and so on. And that's really where my question was coming from.
Right, Sir Robbie. I will relay that to RTVM and to Secretary Andana that you guys are concerned that you'd rather have the broadcasting live and in real time than later in the day. I'll relay that message po.
I want to link this segment with the previous one. We were talking about the learning, the education program for during the pandemic. May role ba yung PCOO to assist the DepEd sa blended learning? Kasi pati yung public education system nahihirapan, di ba? Ano ba yung, di ba gagamitin yung broadcast facilities niya? Tutuloy ba yun?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, Ami. No, we were instructed by the President to utilize PTV, IBC, as well as Radyo Pilipinas to assist the DepEd in the blended learning po by broadcasting some of the classes on radio and on television. That's true, sir. That's true, ma'am.
Pero na-testing niyo na, have you put it through its paces? Nakita ba mga problema? Kasi nag-aalala pa rin yung mga teachers, yung mga school administrators, nahihirapan daw sila. Kaya ba by October 5?
They conducted testing po, Ma'am Ami, noong August, and I think they will be conducting another testing next week. So hopefully po, all systems go na po tayo by October 5.
Okay. Secretary, tanong ko kanina, other advocacies na magkaakibat tayo is freedom of information in particular. Kamusta na po tayo dyan? I mean, there was a lot of fanfare and media and the public welcomed the first EO of the President ordering freedom of information for the executive branch of government. But ever since then, 4 years na po, wala pa rin tayong batas. Now, we know you are endorsing a bill for freedom of information. Given everything, how would you assess? Where are we and where is government's commitment really to a freedom of information law? Given na 4 na taon na, wala pa rin nangyayari dyan.
We're doing very well, Sir Robbie, in terms of implementing the Freedom of Information program under Executive Order number 2. In fact, if you visit our website, foi.gov.ph, you will see 490 government agencies that are open to the public and which citizens can ask information from. We've also been able to convince a lot of local government units to pass their respective FOI ordinances. We have 32 local government units na po, including here in Metro Manila, Valenzuela, Pasig City, and Quezon City. We are very optimistic po that in the coming months, more LGUs will pass their FOI ordinances. In Congress, we're very happy po that Chairman Jojo Lara, the chairman of the Public Information Committee, declared his support po, and hopefully we will be having our public hearing po on FOI this coming October. In the Senate naman po, we've already spoken with Senator Revilla, and he's also promised that we will prioritize FOI in this 18th Congress. So we're very optimistic by the end of the Duterte administration, we will be having an FOI law. Sayang naman po kasi, Sir Robbie, this is a good legacy of the President.
In the meantime, Asec, lalong pinahigpit ang pag-release ng mga SALN, no? Yung Office of the Ombudsman recently restricted access. Meron lang sila mga kondisyon. Halimbawa, dapat may court order as part of a pending case. Tapos, dapat merong request. Tapos, dapat notarized, no? So, are you, as an advocate, actually with the public in terms of appealing, at least to the government agencies that you work with, that this is contrary to the freedom of information advocacy that you're pushing?
Unfortunately, Ma'am Lucy, no, in the hierarchy of policies and public policies, an executive order is lesser than a Republic Act. And the SALN is Republic Act 6713, and it trumps po Executive Order number 2. So that's why it drives us even more to be aggressive in advocating for an FOI law, so that the FOI law will then at least revise to a certain extent or amend the SALN law. As it stands right now, the SALN law trumps po Executive Order number 2. So kung ano po yung interpretation ng ombudsman, we have to respect it, Ma'am Lucy. So hopefully, this becomes a turning point, no, to prioritize the freedom of information para po meron po talagang transparency and accountability in government.
But on the other hand, Asec, there's nothing stopping the Office of the President from releasing the President's SALN, di ba? Kahit walang request. Kasi every year naman, i-release nila yun eh.
That's true po. Nothing stops any government official po from disclosing his or her statement of assets, liabilities, and net worth. You're correct, Ma'am Ami.
Except themselves. The self-censorship. Okay. All right.
Okay.
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 Okay, maraming.
Okay. We'd like to say thank you to Assistant Secretary Kris Ablan of the PCOO Asec. Maraming salamat po for joining. Sorry, nagtagalag ako eh. Asec, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Salamat
Super
po.
delayed.
Salamat po, Sir Ed,
Thank you.
Sir Robbie, Ma'am
Thank
Lucy, and Ma'am Ami. Good evening po.
Good evening. Yeah.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay. Siguro, hintayin natin Malacanang kung magre-release nga ng SALN si Presidente. Regular naman nagre-release, di ba?
Yeah.
Ewan
Nag-release naman siya. Oo. Pero yung iba, yun ang malabo.
Pero usually yung ombudsman circular eh. Kasi the circular basically says that ordinary people cannot ask for a SALN anymore. Not unless you have a court order or you're the ombudsman doing investigation. So it disempowers people from...
Yeah, we know for example sa House of Representatives, sa Congress, ganyan. You're going to have to kailangan ka magpaalam doon sa yung hinihinga mo na SALN, kailangan pumayag yun.
Yes.
As a plenary.
Kailangan papayag siya, which defeats the point.
So,
Kaya nga, what's the point?
Not only that, the whole general conversation about FOI, hindi ko lang nabanggit kay Asec but I did go. I've tried a number of times to go to the FOI website under EO1 of President Duterte. And the reality is, ang hirap You try to apply, you try to FOI something from any department, and it's almost as if kailangan alam mo na yung sagot for you to request properly. Because if your question is too broad or too narrow, it's very easy for a government agency to say, ay, wala dito yung hinihingi mo. And then that's it. Then you have to apply again, try to rephrase your question again. It really is not that easy.
Yeah.
Siguro, ang pwedeng gawin, yung mga reporter, bawat agency, tatanungin yung official, are you going to release your SALN? Hindi ka na magre-request, diba? Tanungin mo sila, are you willing to release your SALN? In the spirit of transparency, tingnan natin kung ano yung mga sagot. Diba? Tanungin natin yon. Ewan ko, sa Supreme Court, matagal na nilang ayaw mag-release talaga dyan ng ano eh.
Yeah.
Ayaw nilang mag-release ng salin eh.
Talaga.
Lalo na ngayon, alam natin kung saan gagamitin yung salin. Di ba? Attorney Larry Gadon is asking for the salin of Justice Marvick Donen, and then explicitly it is going to be about another co-warrant petition.
Baka mako-warrant to. Oo.
Tapos naman na ang Supreme Court, hindi na pwede, di ba? So,
Nasa sa kanila yan.
talaga.
Yan na nga. Ewan ko. Okay.
Actually, it would be nice to have PCOO back again when we have better internet.
Actually,
One of the other issues that nahirapan ako I can't even listen. I can't even hear the answer sometimes. One issue I wanted to ask about was yung the public broadcasting system. Kasi there were in previous administrations there were pending bills for a public broadcasting system. I'm wondering there is one right now, and kung anong pupuntahan, and somebody's pushing it. Diba? Martin was telling us before he assumed the position ng PCOO that he wants to turn Channel 4 into BBC.
Oo nga. Matagal lang ano yun.
3 years ago.
Yeah, matagal na.
4 years.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I'm just relating to you what Martin wanted or said he wanted to do long ago.
Well, in this pandemic, marami na
So yun, anyway.
PTV4, di ba?
BBC is still PTV.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Ayan, please naman si Ed. Sasabihin ka pa naman kay Ed, in fairness, do not blame the internet connection of Asec Ablan. Yung internet connection ni Ed ang may problema ngayon.
Oo nga naman.
Kaya nga,
Okay. Anyway.
And that was all for this edition of the Chiefs. We hope that what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. I'm Luchi Cruz Valdez of News 5.
I'm Ambi Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Robbie Alampay. We are One News.